It is no secret that San Diego is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the United States to purchase a home. And in some cases, to buy a home in San Diego County, you need to go that less traditional mortgage route and think of creative ways to buy a house. Here are 12 creative ways that you can buy a house in San Diego County in 2024. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Spade at Keller Williams Realty, and I make these videos to help you make sense of the real estate market. If you would do me a huge favor, please click the subscribe button. Also, click that little bell so you can be notified every single time we drop fresh new content. And if you find value in this video, please share it with somebody that you think might find some value in it. So let's get to 12 creative different ideas that you can use to purchase a home here in San Diego County. Let's talk about rent-to-own agreements. Now, I get this question a lot. Are there any rent-to-own properties in San Diego? And the answer to your question is yes. Typically, the person that is going to do a rent-to-own agreement with you is going to have paid off the house that they wish to sell to you. We'll get a little bit into seller financing in a second, but rent-to-own agreements, this allows you to secure a price on the property ahead of time using these mortgage payments as sort of a down payment and then building up your equity without actually having to get a mortgage right away. Now, typically in a rent-to-own agreement, there are things that you have to do and timelines that you have to meet. So for example, you might sign a 2 or 3 year lease with the owner of the current property. At the end of that 3 years, you then agree to get a mortgage based on whatever the rate the mortgage is at that time, and then you agree to purchase the property. If you don't, then you just had another rental and that seller is free to sell the house to whomever they want. Let's talk about house hacking for a second, because this is a great way for you to build up equity in a property and get a house in San Diego. So what is house hacking? House hacking is a very common term that's actually been kind of flung around a lot over the last few years. That is where you purchase a property in your name, and let's say you buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Let's just say you do that, or a 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo. Then what you do is you rent out 2 of the bedrooms. Now that can mean you rent out the primary suite with its own private bathroom to someone else, and you live in one of the other bedrooms and rent out the other bedroom, and then you share the bathroom with the other roommate. Or you just rent out the 2 other bedrooms and then share it. They share the bathroom. I've had a lot of my clients do this with 2 different groups. One, students at San Diego State. So I've had some clients who've purchased a house out in, like, say, El Cerrito or Rolando, for example, and then they get SDSU students in. What's great about that is typically the SDSU students are really there for only 9 months, and then they leave during the summer, and then they may or may not come back. So if you didn't like somebody, they're there very temporarily. Now, the other thing that people like to do is rent out to travel nurses. Travel nurses are usually on 13-week contracts, and they like to rent places that are furnished. And if you get somebody that works overnights and you're out of the house all day, this could be a win-win for everyone. Let's talk about co-buying with friends or family. Now, if you're gonna do this, you have to be very, very careful that you trust the people that you are about to go under contract with. I see this a lot with young single women. They'll buy houses with their friends. Then what they do is they move in together, they own the home together, and then they keep it for about 5 years. They sell the property, then they each take their equity, and then they go buy different houses separate from each other. So they just did that to get the initial house buying process going, so that way they could build up the equity. That's just one way to do it. But like I said, you really have to trust the people that you're co-buying with, because if somebody starts missing payments, it's on you, and then that is going to affect your credit for the future. Down payment assistance programs are something that most people don't take enough advantage of. Now, in the city of San Diego, city of La Mesa, National City, all these cities, and in San Diego County, there are a lot of down payment assistance programs that people can take advantage of, but most people aren't doing it. So if you are interested in that, let us know, and we can talk about some of the down payment assistance programs that you may qualify for. Let me tell you, there are millions of dollars out there for people who are wishing to buy a home here in San Diego County, but most people don't know what those down payment assistance programs are, so let's explore some of those because you could be missing out on some free money. I love this next idea, and that is live in it and flip it. So what do I mean by this? Well, first and foremost, you buy a house, you buy a major fixer-upper, and let's say you get a good deal on it. Now you go in and you invest in that home. Now it might take you a year or two to technically flip the property, but you are investing in this home because it's an affordable payment that you can make now, and then you've decided that you are going to invest sweat equity into the property, and then we are going to sell it again in a couple of years or maybe a year, and then we are going to turn around and flip that property, and you're going to make a lot of spread on that equity, which is very, very good. So that is one way that you can do it. You can put as little as 3% down when you're making the purchase of a property because it's not technically a flip. You're living in the property, so it's your primary residence. But if you can get in for as little as 3% down, everything is manageable. Then you can turn around and say, okay, well, if the market increases 8%, 10% like it's been doing, let's just be very conservative though and say 4%, you're still gonna make money on the spread. So this is just one way that you can do it. You just buy something that you just live in, and then you eventually fix it up and we sell it. There is also lease with an option to buy, which is very similar to a rent to own. That is just simply leasing a home with the option to purchase it at the end of the lease term, often at a predetermined price. So it's kind of the same thing, but you're already kind of putting out there that you have the means to finance the property ahead of time. Shared equity agreements. Now this is something that is becoming a little bit more popular. That is where, let's say for example, you want to make a purchase of a property, and let's say you want to put down 20%, but it's going to take you too long to save for the down payment. But you have 5% you want to put down, and you find somebody else who's going to come in and they're going to put down 15% to make up that 20%, and then you're going to be able to cover the closing costs. So then that way it makes your payment a little bit more manageable. Now the shared equity works when you go to sell the property down the road, and that means it is predetermined when you go into escrow that your investor X is going to get a percentage of the total equity on the back end when you go to sell the property. So that will all be done on the deed, and it will all be in there because you're going to have a second lien holder position on the property. So for example, let's say they help you put the 15% down, and they say, you know what, buyer, as soon as you go to sell this property, I'm going to take 30% of the total equity. Let's say the equity is $100,000. They're going to keep $30,000 plus get their initial investment back. So then you either are going to want to agree to that or not agree to that, but that's going to be determined up front because there's going to be liens that will be put on the property saying so. So anyway, this is a really good thing if you want to get into a property, and I think it's a great option. One of the other things that we can do is explore government type homes like HUD homes. So a HUD home is when somebody purchases a property through FHA or VA and then they get foreclosed on. What HUD likes to do is resell the home back to somebody who's going to live in it. Now they'll sell to investors, but they prefer not to do that, and they'll only sell to investors if the home is in very bad condition. Right now in San Diego, we don't have a ton of HUD homes, but that doesn't mean that they won't come up, because I can tell you there is a lot of VA and FHA foreclosures in San Diego. I mean, not a lot, but there are some in there. I do suspect that there'll be more. So this is another option that we can explore, is in terms of seller homes that are owned by the government. Now let's talk about seller financing. We touched on it at the beginning of this video, but seller financing is where the seller is actually financing the property for you. So how does that work? Typically, like I said before, the seller owns the house free and clear. It may have been a rental, it may have been their home. What we're going to do is we're going to get an attorney involved. But what's going to happen is the seller says, okay, Mr. Buyer, I will finance your home at X percentage rate, and you're going to have to put X percent down. Typically, it's not going to be for a 30-year loan. It'll typically be maybe a 5-year, an 8-year, a 10-year, and then you're going to have to refinance off at that time. So seller financing can be a great way to get your foot in the door, especially if you've got money to put down, but your credit is probably less than stellar. It's all done. We get a lawyer involved. The lawyer fills out all the seller financing paperwork. We make sure all of that is in order. offer. And then what we do is we can close the deal, and the seller then, you're making your monthly mortgage payments to the seller. Now, beware, because the problem with seller financing is they don't have to follow the same foreclosure rules as a lender does, as a bank does. The foreclosure rules are much different. So with a lender, they can't send you a notice of default until 90 days. Well, with seller financing, if you're not paying them after 30 days, they can send you that. So the foreclosure process speeds up a little bit, but if it's an option and you're very comfortable doing it, I say go for it. Crowdfunding is a way that people are looking to make purchases of homes. So a lot of my buyers who are getting married, they do a crowdfunding page to have their guests donate to their house fund, which I think is a great way, because who else needs a new set of towels, and nobody wants to get china anymore. So do a crowdfunding page, especially if you're getting married or even graduating from college. I think that this is a great thing. Have a crowdfunding page so that way people can donate to your crowdfunding page to help you buy a home. So I think that this is a great idea. I've seen a lot of people start to do this. I think this is one way that you can go. I know like Honey Fund Me will allow you to do that, you know, when you're getting married, you can use that, but there's other crowdfunding sources that you can use in order to help you buy a home. Buying a foreclosure at auction. Now, I always tell people you have to be aware, because people are always asking me, Chris, I want to buy a house at foreclosure. I think that that's great if you want to do that, but here's what you have to keep in mind. You don't get to do any home inspections or anything like that, and in most cases you don't get to tour the property. You barely get to look at the title report. So there's a lot of things that are very, very important when it comes to buying a house at foreclosure. So you really need to be careful when it comes to doing that. I think that smart investors know what they're doing, but too many times I've seen people do foolish things like buying second position loans. If you buy a second position loan, you just paid off somebody's loan and now you're without it, and you can try to collect on it from the current seller, but they couldn't afford it. The other thing is, I'd also be very leery about buying tax delinquent properties, because first of all, 7 years is when the tax man starts foreclosing on properties, but then there's a right of redemption. So these are things you just want to be careful of. You want to be really savvy. And by the way, you're going to need cash because they don't let you finance foreclosures, but it is an option if you have it available to you. Another thing you can do is assume an existing mortgage. Now you can do this with VA financing. You can assume somebody's VA loan. It takes about 45 to 60 days on average to assume that loan. Now, what is going to end up happening is you are going to have to come up with your down payment, because the house itself is going to be worth more than what the veteran paid for it. So if the veteran paid $500, it's now worth $800. The veteran's still going to want to make money on the equity, so you're going to have to come in with a huge chunk of change. But if they've got a 2% interest rate, let's say, because some people have 2 and 3% interest rates, it might be worth it to you to do that. These, like I said, take a little bit longer to do, but they are doable. You just have to know the right people to help you through it. Now, each one of these strategies has its own set of challenges. I'm not saying anyone is better than the other, but these are some things that you can consider if you would like to buy a home in San Diego in 2024. Tell me what you think below in the comments. Are these strategies something that you would consider if you're thinking about buying a house here in San Diego? Or is there something you've done that I've missed? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you would like to book an appointment with me, feel free to do so. My contact information is below, so please just click the calendar link and you can book a Zoom call, you can book a phone call, or we can meet in person in my office. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.